Welcome to the MS&Me Radio Network. The broadcast shows are for informational and entertainment purposes only. They are not designed to provide listeners with specific personal, medical, or counseling advice. Individuals with a medical issue should always consult their healthcare provider. MS&Me is not responsible for content of individual shows. The views expressed by show hosts or their guests are their own. Enjoy the show.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another exciting episode of You're More Than Your MS. Hey, gang. I just finished binge watching the second season of Jessica Jones and thought this would be a good time to go over the Marvel Cinematic Universe's TV series that I have binge watched from Netflix. First is Marvel's Daredevil. Was the first Marvel TV series on Netflix and now has 2 seasons available for binge watching. What sets Matt Murdock apart from most superheroes isn't his backstory, it's his handicap. Murdock is blind. The result of a childhood accident may have removed his ability to see, but gifted him with heightened senses of touch, taste, hearing, and smell. Murdock sets up a law practice in his old neighborhood of Hell's Kitchen, New York, where he now fights against injustice as a respected lawyer by day and as the masked vigilante Daredevil by night. In Daredevil, Netflix takes on one shadowy corner of the Marvel Universe. The fight scenes are often better appreciated by the ears than the eyes. It's the cavalcades of crunching bones and sickening, juicy splooshes of crushing skulls in the show's ultra-violent beatdowns that signal Marvel's turn from the kodochromatic kapow of his big-budget movies towards a grittier, more adult-oriented production. This is a smart, simmering, human-scale crime drama that transcends the superhero genre, but don't worry, there's plenty of grit for fanboys and girls. Blind lawyer vigilante Matt Murdock, the much-beloved Daredevil of comic book fame, is just the man to lead Marvel's latest charge of the small screen. The first season of Daredevil debuted on Fridays. I've lost the date. On Netflix, and it's the first of the 4 standalone series from the streaming service featuring outsiders, superheroes who fight crime on a more neighborhood as opposed to global and even intergalactic scale. Daredevil and company won't interact with Avengers superheroes, although their stories are intersecting New York and still cleaning up from the nasty extraterrestrial battle from the last Avengers movie, and crime lord Wilson Fisk has very specific plans for the Big Apple's development and extra legal ways of getting it done. No redevelopment is not the sexiest of plots, but never fear, there's also human trafficking and drug dealers to tackle. Fisk and his associates cartel are being thwarted by Murdock, a one-man cleanup crew who patrols Hell's Kitchen at night with a black watch cap pulled over his eyes. The glibness associated with Marvel's movie wing is absent, although Murdock's chipper law partner and longtime pal Foggy Nelson provides some comic relief. Unlike Gotham, which its similar theme of the corrupted city. The drama here is more serialized than procedural, as Murdoch and Nelson take on a series of lost cause legal cases. The first introduces us to Karen Page, a secretary fingered in the murder of a co-worker and who later joins the law firm and figures large in the Daredevil mythos, slowly shedding light on Fisk's plan. Daredevil takes its time drilling out Murdoch's backstory, and that's where the show's realism works against it. Until Murdoch explains a few episodes in exactly how his superpowers work, this fanboy has major difficulties suspending his disbelief during the otherwise effectively staging hand-to-hand combat sequences. Despite that, there's a real vulnerability to Cox's Murdoch. Both physically, he does get hurt and requires near constant TLC from Nurse Claire Temple, and spiritually, as he struggles with the devil inside. At one point, Murdoch confides to a villain that he takes pleasure in delivering this rough justice. Claire hears this and tells him she doesn't believe it. Cox makes you wonder if it's true. Marvel. The next series that I'm going to talk about is Marvel's Jessica Jones. Is the second Marvel TV series that's streamed on Netflix and now has 2 seasons you can binge watch. Ever since her short-lived stint as a superhero ended in tragedy, Jessica Jones has been rebuilding her personal life and career as a hot-tempered, sarcastic, badass private detective in Hell's Kitchen, New York City, plagued by self-loathing and a wicked case of PSTD. Jessica battles demons from within and without, using her extraordinary ability as an unlikely champion for those in need, especially if there's willing to cut her a check. If they didn't both hail from the same mothership, I'd say Jessica Jones, the Netflix neo-Nero, about a super-powered private eye with a traumatic past, is a direct rebuke to the casual devastation route on Midtown Manhattan by the gaily costumed characters in the Avengers, full of spectral, devoid of emotion. Based on a relatively new addition to the Marvel Pathos, Jessica Jones is the second of 5 planned Netflix series about purposeful, realistic superheroes, street-level crime fighting with complex motivations instead of trailer-ready quibs. First came a very good Daredevil with its eye-popping action sequence featuring Matt Murdock, the blind lawyer with heightened senses who come into his own when he takes on a corrupt businessman with tentacles in every criminal enterprise in the city. The equally dark Jessica Jones is less of a origin story and more of a aftermath one, with superhuman strength and the ability to leap tall buildings in, if not a single bound, certainly 2 or 3. She tried the superhero route once when the series opens. However, she's a hardened, no-frills private eye who uses her powers simply to get the job done as it means to the end. And the end is usually at the bottom of the bottle of whiskey. Don't have feelings, okay? She tells her estranged best friend Trish Walker at one point. As Jessica, the striking Kristen Ritter, with her jet black hair, alabaster skin, and knife-edge nose, talks tough, but she is not a weapon so much as a walking wound. We come to discover that Jones' brief superhero career ended when she fell helplessly under the sway of a man named Kilgrave, powerfully and maliciously gifted the mind control. She thought she had vanquished him the year before. She learns in the first episode via another victim that he has returned, still singularly obsessed with Jessica Jones. Kilgrave is slow to reveal himself, but he is insidious, always in the back of her mind, and the fact that he can weaponize anyone means he can be anywhere, which keeps the tension at a rolling boil. In a television landscape already choked with explosive sexual violence against women, Jessica Jones uses mind control as metaphor not only for the physical powerlessness victims feel during sexual assault, but the mental and emotional facets of domestic violence, the virtual prison in which women are conditioned by their abusers to feel they deserve to be brutalized. It's compelling subtext, masterfully executed, but there is plenty to latch on to otherwise, though through the show is thankfully not a procedural. Jessica is a cracking investigator, and her world-weary retorts and penchants for bare-knuckle brawling is both homage and by virtue of her gender novelty. Comic book fans will be gratified by Jessica's tangled relationship with local barkeep Luke Cage, another streetwise Marvel superhero who happens to be next to Bat for Netflix, and Jessica's female charade of colleagues and friends have their own tantalizing subplots and share her sense of grim purpose and determination. This is not the candy-coated girl power of CBS's freshman series Supergirl, which is doing something very different. Jessica Jones is more psychological, complex, acknowledging how painful it can be to flee, to be free when you have an iron fist. Marvel's Luke Cage is the third Marvel TV series that was streamed on Netflix and has the second season scheduled to be released this summer on June 22nd. After a sabotage experiment leaves him with super strength and unbreakable skin, Luke Cage becomes a fugitive, trying to rebuild his life in modern-day Harlem, New York City, but he is soon pulled out of the shadow and must fight a battle for the heart of his city, forcing him to confront a past he had tried to bury. One of the best things about Marvel's growing set of series on Netflix is how each has managed to create its own distinct feel while not straying too far from the overall tone. Daredevil is dark, literally, and contains some of the universe's most grisly violence, while Jessica Jones' narrative bleakness is tempered by a bright banter. Luke Cage is smooth and deliberate, with Cage himself fighting to move both himself and his neighborhood into the light. All three protagonists struggle with the idea of heroism and how they fit into a world forever changed by the incident. But they do, each finding their own way to the path that will eventually bring them all together with Iron Fist for the defenders. But for now, each story belongs uniquely to its title protagonist, and while Luke Cage had an important impact on Jessica Jones' story, his own series finds him removed from those events, taking place several months after Jessica Jones. Cage has relocated to Harlem from Hell's Kitchen and is attempting to keep a low profile. He's barely making ends meet as he sweeps hair at a local barbershop and cleans dishes at a nightclub owned by the criminal boss Cornell Cottonmouth Stokes. It doesn't take very long for those stories to connect as young regulars at the barbershop see an opportunity for quick cash that soon turns bloody. The fallout from this is what pushes Cage to finally move forward with his life and embrace his strength for the protection of those who need it. Coulter has described the series as Marvel's version of The Wire, which is bold, yet in many ways adept. It's an inmate portrait of street life, detailing not only the inner workings of the crime syndicates, but also the beleaguered police, sleazing politicians, and young people in the community who see guns and drugs as an easy way to make money. Luke Cage is, it should be noted, hates guns, and one of the great details of his fight sequences is not just the physicality he uses to overpower his foes, but also in how he pointedly destroys their firearms as he goes. As he tells Pops, a man with a gun is no father. Cage is a physical badass, as demonstrated in a number of thrillingly satisfying scenes, but he has a much quieter side. He reads the New Yorker and discusses his preferences for the crime writing of George Palacino and has seriously opinions on Bruce Lee's versus Jet Li. He's a gentleman hero and a reluctant one, but when he's threatened by a young man with a gun who calls him the N-word, Cage, even after a long day full of emotion toil, confronts him. Do you see a N-word standing in front of you? He asks, also asking if the boy knows the significance of the historical black hero Crispus featured on the building in front of him. I see a dead N-word, the boy replies. Cage sets him straight. Race matters in Luke Cage, but most essentially, the way that he shows fully embraces its Harlem location with style and substance. There's an intimacy of place here, and it extends to all corners of the series in cultural specificity and details. The idea of Luke Cage, not just as a hero, but as a black superhero, is important here. In that way, and others, Luke Cage is a story that's about more than a vigilante. Jessica Jones dealt brilliantly with the complicated, important issues of rape, consent, power, and being a survivor. And this series also deals with difficult real world issues that go beyond metahumans and cartoon villains. As with Daredevil, it's about changing the viewpoint of the community to not allow a villain to rule just because it's easier. Cornell and his politician sister, Mara, are like the two sides of Kingpin. Cornell cares about the money, power, and respect, while Mira uses those means to get to her altruistic ends. It's a complicated corruption. Speaking of the other defenders, fans of Jessica Jones will miss Karen Ritter's investigator and her electric spark with Cage dearly as the series begins. But another heroine soon arrives, Misty Knight, a detective who not only has her own bright banter and connection with Cage, but who is her own brand of badass. I just want to step away from TV series for a second and tell you about an audiobook I just finished listening to. It was Guilty Pleasures, Anita Blake Vampire Hunter series, the first book, by Laurel K. Hamilton. Ever since the Supreme Court granted the undead equal rights, most people think vampires are just ordinary folks with fangs. I know better. I've seen their victims. I carry their scars. But now a serial killer is murdering vampires, and the most powerful blood-sucking sucker in town wants me to find the killer. In a world where vampires, zombies, and werewolves have been declared legal citizens of the United States, Anita Blake is an animator, a profession that involves raising the dead for mourning relatives. But Anita is also known as a fearsome hunter of criminal vampires, and she's often employed to investigate cases that are far too much for conventional police. But as Anita gains the attention of vampire masters of her hometown of St. Louis, she also risks revealing an intriguing secret about herself, the source of her unusual strength and power. Guilty Pleasure is the first Anita Blake vampire novel by Laurel K. Hamilton, but when you listen to it, you will wish that it was not. What I mean is that convoluted sentences is that Anita is well into her career as an animator when this book opens, and the more you find out about her backstory, the more you want to learn. One of the most important things in this story is when the master vampire, Jean-Claude, puts the first two marks upon Anita, which links her psychically and makes her somewhat immune to the mental powers of the vampires. Obviously, this will have long-term repercussions in the series, but it's not as monumentous a change since this is the first novel in the series. When it happens, Anita has talked about killing vampires, but we have yet to see her ply her trade. If there had been a prequel to this story in which Anita earned her reputation as the executioner, and we learned the rules of the game in terms of vampires and this brave new world they inhabit, then this transformation in Guilty Pleasures would have the weight it deserves. Similarly, the idea that the 1,000-year-old master vampire of St. Louis wants to hire Anita to solve the sudden rash of vampire murders also has less impact than it would if the story was told further down the line. Hamilton comes up with some excellent ideas in this novel, but you can imagine how much more of an impact you would have if this was the first or third or fourth Anita Blake novel instead of the first. However, Hamilton gets high marks for giving us the feel that we have stepped into an ongoing story, always a laudable goal. You have to be quite optimistic about her ability to up the ante as the series continues. Mystic is luminous in the role, bringing a fiery energy to Misty that's smart, sexy, and a little mysterious. It's a perfect mirror for Cage, especially since she's strong, well written, and not a traditional sidekick or love interest. The same is true for Luke's wife, Reva, who returns in flashbacks in connection as us not only to Luke's superpower origins and her own role in them, but also to connect the backstory to the events revealed in Jessica Jones. Luke Cage does an excellent job giving each of its cast members distinct personalities and memorable moments that create immediate stakes. Theo Rossi's Shades isn't just Cornell's henchman. He has his own unique story, and one that's closely tied to Cage's past. Similarly, Frank Wally's Raphael Scarf as Misty's partner isn't forgotten or written off as backup. In this world, everyone has a place, and it matters. But none shine as brightly as Coulter. Like we saw glimpses of in Jessica Jones, he gives Cage a sense of reminiscence mixed with righteous defiance that hits well the right notes for a hero who uses his strength only as a last resort. And he does so in low tones and with a casual confidence. Though Cage isn't always confident, he's extremely principled with a magnetic charisma, making him a kind of Captain America to his ragtag group of vigilantes. Though he may struggle to define his heroism and what it means for himself and Harlem, there are no complications for viewers. He is the hero you've been waiting for. Well, my friends, that brings us to the end of another episode. I hope you enjoy everything and will get a chance to check out the things I reviewed for you. And I hope you will return for even more reviews next week. I would like to thank MS&Me Radio and my listeners for giving me the opportunity to share my passions with you. Good night, and always remember, you're more than your MS.